The fleet drifted in silent formation above the ruined colony, their hulls glowing faintly against the starlight. Admiral Kaldar stood at the viewport of his flagship, arms folded behind his back, his expression a mixture of boredom and disdain. Another world subdued, another cluster of trembling bipeds who had dared to scatter themselves among the stars. He had lost count of how many human settlements they had raided, but the pattern never changed: fear, fire, and then silence. His officers no longer even bothered to celebrate. "They crumble so easily," murmured Commander Varric, his second in command. "Why does High Command insist we continue these sweeps? The humans barely qualify as sentients." Kaldar let the silence linger before answering. "Because the Empire dislikes loose ends. A species clever enough to climb out of their gravity wells may, given centuries, stumble into relevance. We prune the garden before weeds can grow." His voice was smooth, practiced, less conviction than habit. On the tactical displays, human survivors were being rounded up, their transmissions jammed before any distress could carry far. The Admiral's eyes narrowed, noting how calmly the stragglers seemed to move. No panicked flight, no shrieking across their primitive channels. Just silence, as though the colony had expected this outcome. "They bore me," Kaldar muttered. "Even prey should know how to scream." The bridge crew chuckled dryly. The sentiment was common. Humans were fragile, emotional, unpredictable. Yet here, their stillness unsettled him. His unease sharpened when the sensors flagged a buried anomaly. Deep below the colony's surface lay the twisted skeleton of a warship, ancient and massive. Its energy signature was faint, more carcass than machine, but the structure was unmistakably of alien make, one of their own, abandoned generations ago. Varric leaned closer to the display. That shouldn't be here. This vessel was lost in the frontier wars. How did primitives drag it across their dirt ball? "Luck," Kaldar replied too quickly. Yet his stomach tightened. He had been trained to believe in superiority, in inevitability. Still, the thought that humans had lived above such a relic, without begging to trade it, without tearing each other apart over it, unsettled him more than their silence. Orders were given. Excavation drones cut through soil and stone, peeling back layers of human habitation until the broken starship's carcass was laid bare. The aliens mocked as they worked, calling the humans carrion feeders clinging to old bones. When the humans resisted, they did so in peculiar ways. Small skirmishes erupted, strategic, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Outnumbered defenders drew the invaders into tunnels and collapsed them. Others retreated into ruined streets only to vanish, leaving alien squads wandering into ambushes. None of it slowed the excavation, but it felt rehearsed, like an orchestra playing toward a finale no one else could hear. Kaldar dismissed the thought, though unease gnawed deeper. "Let them posture," he told Varric. "They die, their relic is ours. High Command will be pleased." Hours later, as the broken starship's hull shimmered under harsh lights, Kaldar inspected it in person. His claws scraped along the metal, noting scars of ancient battles. Power conduits lay gutted, control nodes shattered. A husk, nothing more. An empty shell, Varric confirmed. Barely worth scrapping. But as Kaldar gazed at the vessel, he noticed something strange. The humans hadn't buried it in reverence or ignorance. The area around it bore careful reinforcement, scaffolds disguised as ruins, conduits laid like veins into the ground. It looked less like a forgotten relic than an operating theater, prepared and waiting. He turned to question his officers, but before words could leave his mouth, human prisoners were paraded through the excavation site. They didn't struggle or weep. One woman even lifted her chin and smiled faintly, as though she knew a secret. That smile unsettled him more than weapons fire ever had. Back aboard his ship, Kaldar tried to shake it. Perhaps the humans had lost their minds, surrendering to fatalism. Perhaps they were simply broken. Yet when reports came that their transmissions, though jammed, continued to pulse on strange frequencies, he felt his chest tighten. Messages weren't meant for escape. They were signals, patterns, codes he could not decipher. "Let them babble," Varric scoffed. "Their cries will fade into static." Kaldar forced himself to agree, though the certainty in his voice thinned. Yes, static. What he didn't know was that Earth had already heard. Across hidden networks, the sight of the derelict being unearthed broadcast silently. Deep beneath Earth's crust, in bunkers shielded from alien eyes, generals and engineers stood from their consoles. For decades they had been preparing for this moment, waiting for the Empire's arrogance to trip over its own pride. In a cavernous chamber lit by cold blue light, General Adrian Hale pressed a hand to the console and leaned toward her comlink. Her face was tired, carved with years of secrecy, but her voice carried a calm authority. "They've taken the bait. The relic is exposed." She glanced toward the towering silhouette of machinery behind her, the heart of Project Retribution. "Bring her online." All across Earth and its shadow colonies, signals blinked green. What the Empire believed a graveyard was, in truth, a cocoon. The broken warship had been stripped, studied, and rebuilt with human ingenuity stitched into alien bone. Where the Empire saw junk, humanity had seen a seed. Back aboard his flagship, Kaeldar poured himself a glass of distilled crystal wine, savoring the burn down his throat. Victory had been too easy. It was always too easy. Yet the smile of that human woman haunted him, as though she were watching him through the void even now. "Admiral," Varric interrupted, voice stiff. "Long-range sensors detect unusual energy surges from beneath the colony." Kaeldar frowned. "Their pitiful reactors can't produce anything significant." "No, sir. This is different." A tremor rolled through the planet's surface. The excavation site lit up with sudden, violent power, arcs of energy crackling across the derelict's frame. Alien crews staggered back as the once-dead vessel awakened, shadows of its ancient might flickering like a heartbeat returning after long stillness. Kael'thar's hand tightened on his glass until it cracked. From deep underground, Hale's voice whispered across encrypted channels, a whisper Kaeldar couldn't yet hear, but that would soon echo across the stars. "They found it. Good. Now let them understand what they've done." The derelict shuddered, panels splitting to reveal a skeleton reforged with human steel, circuitry glowing with hybrid life. The ground quaked beneath its rising form, and the colony's defenders stepped back with grim reverence. Their patience, their silence, their strange composure, it all coalesced into a single truth. This hadn't been a raid. This had been the trigger. Kaeldar stared, the first seed of fear curling in his chest. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he realized he had not subdued prey. He had woken something far more dangerous. And the humans were smiling. Admiral Kaeldar did not sleep. He sat rigid in the command chair of his flagship, eyes locked on the growing anomaly below. The derelict starship, once nothing more than a rusted carcass, now pulsed with alien and unfamiliar signatures. Each surge of power rolled through his sensors like the heartbeat of a predator testing its limbs. Reports poured in from the excavation crews. Entire battalions had fled the awakening vessel, their discipline shattered. Some claimed to see patterns of light moving across its hull, symbols that didn't belong to the Empire. Others swore the ship had spoken, a low mechanical voice vibrating through their helmets. Kaeldar dismissed such hysteria, though the weight in his chest refused to lift. Varric stood at his side, visibly uneasy. "Admiral, scans indicate that power conduits are not of Imperial design. The architecture has been altered. I don't understand how." Kael'thar's jaw tightened. "Humans, they have meddled with it." The word tasted bitter. For generations, humanity had been dismissed as a fledgling nuisance, useful only for labor and exploitation. And yet, the evidence glared at him, metal grafted to alien bone, circuitry humming with rhythm not found in any archive of his people. The humans had not simply studied the derelict, they had claimed it, reshaped it, made it breathe again. Across the stars, Earth Command came alive. In a fortified chamber beneath the surface, General Hale paced in measured strides. Around her, technicians and officers worked with an intensity born not of excitement, but of inevitability. This was the day every hidden calculation had been aimed toward. "Status of the Retribution," she asked without looking up. "System stable, ma'am. Core synchronization at 96%. Final armaments locked." Hale stopped, fingers brushing the edge of a steel table scarred by years of planning. She had lived her life knowing humanity's peace was an illusion, that silence in the night sky meant predators listening. The derelict had fallen to her 30 years ago, like a curse and a blessing. Generations had sacrificed in secret to rebuild it. Now the Empire's arrogance had handed them the perfect excuse to unveil their work. "Transmit on open frequency," she ordered. "Let them hear us." Moments later, across the void, Kaeldhar's comms officer stiffened. "Sir, an unauthorized transmission is cutting through our encryption nets. It originates from the planet." Play it, Kaeldar demanded. The bridge filled with a calm, steady human voice. General Hale's tone carried no rage, no plea, only chilling certainty. This is Earth Command. You thought us prey. You mistook our silence for weakness. That era ends today. We are done pretending. Her words fell like blades. No shouts, no bravado. Just the quiet assurance of a predator, announcing it would no longer stay hidden. Kaeldar's officers exchanged uneasy glances. Varric whispered, "They sound certain, Admiral. Certain in a way prey should not." Before Kaeldar could answer, the derelict stirred fully. Panels slid open to reveal weapons that glowed with hybrid energy. Engines roared with a resonance that clawed at the bones. The ship rose into the air, its sheer mass tearing stone and soil free, as if the world itself resented letting it go. "Lock weapons on the vessel." Kaeldar barked. But even as his fleet moved, the impossible unfolded. The derelict blurred, vanishing into a ripple of space-time before reappearing kilometers away. A micro-jump, precise, surgical, executed with technology humans should not possess. The first counterattack came without warning. Lances of searing energy slashed through an escort frigate, slicing it apart before the crew could cry out. No wild volleys, no reckless waste, just one strike, precise and final. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Kaeldar's claws dug into the chair. How? In another command chamber half a system away, Hale stood unmoving as reports streamed in. Her expression revealed neither triumph nor joy, only grim satisfaction. Every move had been calculated, every sacrifice weighed long before this day. She knew the price humanity would pay in the years to come. But today, she needed the galaxy to understand, Earth was no one's pasture. Kaeldar ordered a full barrage. Dozens of alien warships unleashed storms of plasma and kinetic fire, saturating the void. Yet the human-claimed vessel danced between shots, micro-jumping through rippling wormholes that bent the battlefield into their design. Their tactics were unervingly calm, almost minimalist, never firing more than necessary, never wasting movement. The Admiral's heart pounded, not with the thrill of battle, but with dread. He had fought countless wars, faced insurgencies, crushed rebellions. None of it compared to this. Humanity was not flailing in desperation, they were orchestrating. Every step the Empire took, humans had already calculated. "Admiral," Varric's voice cracked. "They knew. They were waiting for us." Kaeldar turned sharply. "Impossible. They're primitives." But his words faltered as the human warship fired again, annihilating another frigate with flawless precision. Across the fleet, panic rippled. For the first time in his career, Kaeldar saw his crews hesitate, their arrogance fracturing into something dangerously close to fear. Hours later, in the solitude of his chambers, Kaeldar replayed the human broadcast. Again and again, he listened to that calm declaration, "We are done pretending." He tried to smother the unease gnawing at him by studying old war records of humanity. His aides had compiled them as a curiosity years ago, brutal conflicts between tribes and nations before they had even left their planet. He watched grainy footage of trenches drowning in mud, skies blackened by bombers, cities burned into ash by firestorms. He saw mushroom clouds bloom like obscene flowers, entire generations erased in seconds. And all of this, he realized with a hollow chest, was not alien oppression or survival against an external threat. It was what humans had done to each other. Varric entered quietly, catching sight of the screens. His face drained of color. "Admiral, this is madness. They slaughtered their own kind like this." Kaeldar's voice was rough, nearly broken. "Yes. Before they even reached the stars, they forged themselves in fire." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The Admiral, once certain of Imperial supremacy, now felt a chill that no star's warmth could dispel. This was not prey. This was a species that had practiced destruction as casually as breathing, and now they had been handed the tools of empires. The thought that clawed at him was worse than fear. It was respect, grudging and unwilling. The humans had hidden their true nature beneath frail exteriors and quiet colonies. Now exposed, they were something the Empire had no doctrine for. He closed his eyes and whispered, not to Varric but to himself, "We have awakened predators." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. And though no one aboard his fleet dared say it aloud, every officer felt it too. The galaxy had shifted, and nothing would ever return to the way it had been. The council chamber burned with voices. Arguments ricocheted off the marble walls, alien dignitaries snarling across the vast table where centuries of strategy had once been carved into law. Holographic displays of shattered fleets hung above them, images of ships torn apart by surgical strikes, supply convoys vanishing into the black, colonies isolated overnight. The human shadow loomed larger than any projection could capture. High Chancellor Sereth pounded the dais with a clawed hand. This is hysteria. A scavenger species cannot dismantle our fleets in weeks. They struck by chance, exploiting a relic we abandoned. Nothing more. From a far end, Admiral Kael'thar's voice cut through the noise. Lower than usual, roughened by sleepless nights, it carried an edge that silenced even his rivals. Chance does not explain precision. Chance does not explain anticipation. Every move we made, they were already waiting for. They are not improvising. They are executing a plan decades in the making. The chamber rippled with unease. No one liked admitting weakness. To concede that Prey had prepared this trap was to admit the Empire had been blind. Counselor Dravan scoffed, though his quills bristled with unease. You give them too much credit, Admiral. They are resourceful vermin, yes, but vermin nonetheless. What is one ship, even one reborn, in their crude image? We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. Kaeldar leaned forward, eyes burning. Numbers mean nothing against an enemy who understands war as intimately as breathing. I have watched their histories. Entire continents drowned in blood, not for survival, not against predators, but against themselves. They know destruction in a way we have never conceived. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, and they are not afraid to use it. The chamber fell still. For a moment, the counselors glanced at one another, each unwilling to voice the same forbidden thought. Perhaps the humans were not the lesser. Perhaps the Empire had underestimated the one species whose brutality was self-taught. When the silence threatened to suffocate, Sereth snapped, "Enough of this defeatism. The Council will not indulge your nightmares. We will double our fleets. We will crush their hybrid abomination and remind them of their place." A ripple of forced agreement followed, but Kaeldar read the fear in their eyes. They wanted to believe numbers would save them, because the alternative, that the tide had already turned, was unbearable. Far from the council chambers, humanity pressed forward with quiet inevitability. In hidden shipyards carved into hollowed asteroids, engineers bent their spines over hybrid vessels. Human steel interlocked with alien alloys, circuitry woven together by hands trembling not with fear, but with determination. These were not factories of triumph, but forges of necessity. General Hale walked among them, silent save for the occasional nod. Her soldiers and engineers looked up at her with weary respect, eyes shadowed by endless labor. She saw in them the same expression she wore each morning, grim acknowledgement that their lives had been spent building toward this single moment. She paused beside a young technician calibrating a wormhole drive, the boy's hands shaking as he adjusted delicate nodes. He looked no older than her son would have been, had he lived. "Steady," she said softly. The boy startled, then forced his hand still. She placed one of hers over his, anchoring the tremor. "Fear sharpens, but it must not guide you. The galaxy is watching now. Every mistake we make echoes louder than every success." The boy swallowed hard but nodded. Hale let go, her expression unreadable. Inside, she carried a private grief that had long since calcified into resolve. She cannot undo what the Empire had taken, but she could ensure humanity would never again be prey. News of human strikes spread through the alien ranks like a plague. Rumors spoke of entire fleets vanishing without survivors, of soldiers surrendering before battles even began. Alien soldiers whispered by their bunks that humans did not fight wars, they ended them with dispassionate efficiency. Kaeldar heard these whispers echo through his own flagship. His officers, once arrogant and unshaken, now glanced at shadows on the monitors as though expecting them to strike. He stood among them, a figure hollowed by recognition. On one particularly quiet night, Varric confronted him. "You speak of them as predators. But what of us, Admiral? Are we not an empire forged in conquest? How are they different?" Kaeldar turned, eyes tired yet burning with clarity. "We conquer for dominion, for resource, for pride. They fight as if every war is the last war they will ever fight. That difference makes them unstoppable. We have always believed there would be another tomorrow. They fight as though tomorrow may not come." Varric said nothing, but the truth in those words hollowed him too. The war dragged on with grim inevitability. Human fleets did not roar across the stars in reckless triumph. They advanced in silence, dismantling the Empire's arteries with surgical cruelty. Supply depots blinked out, command centers went dark, and entire sectors found themselves cut off, left to wither without ever seeing a human ship. The Empire's might, once a monolith, now cracked like glass under subtle pressure. Each fracture carried the same message, unspoken but undeniable. Humanity was not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to ensure no empire ever dared to touch them again. Kaeldar, once the embodiment of superiority, now found himself an unwilling prophet. He carried his warnings to the Council again and again, each time ignored, dismissed, silenced. They could not admit the truth, not even to themselves. Pride was a heavier chain than any fleet. Yet in the Admiral's private reflections, the truth was undeniable. He had seen their calm broadcasts, their efficiency, their refusal to gloat. He had seen the cold fire in their eyes. He knew what his leaders refused to see. He whispered it again to himself in the silence of his chambers, as if repetition might dull the horror. We have awakened predators. And somewhere across the void, on a world still scarred by old wars, General Hale whispered her own words into the silence of her command bunker. We are not done yet. The inevitability of collision hung heavy, drawing both sides closer to the moment neither could escape. The galaxy trembled in the pause before the storm. The Predator and the Empire locked on course toward final reckoning. The Armada came like a storm, blotting out the stars as it bled from hyperspace. Thousands of Imperial warships formed a wall of firepower, their hulls etched with the arrogance of centuries of dominance. At the center of this steel tide sat the High Council's flagship, a Leviathan meant to remind the galaxy who ruled. The message was clear. This would not be a skirmish. It would be annihilation. Admiral Kaeldar stood on his bridge, watching the fleet assemble with a hollowness he could not voice. Pride demanded he call it inevitable victory. His heart, sharpened by weeks of bitter truths, whispered otherwise. He remembered Hale's calm broadcast, the vessel rising from its grave, the precision with which humans had dismantled his forces. He remembered the fear in his own officers' eyes. Now he stood between his council's delusion and the reality of predators awakened. Across the void, hidden within the folds of distorted space, humanity prepared. General Adrian Hale's command chamber was quiet, almost reverent. No fanfare, no roars of vengeance, only the hum of machines and the steady voices of soldiers running final checks. She moved among them with calm precision, her presence anchoring every trembling hand. Before her loomed the warship born of ruin and desperation, the vessel once abandoned, now remade as absolute retribution. Its alien skeleton had been reforged with human will, its heart beating with hybrid fire. To her it was not a triumph, but a warning given form. Admiral Kaeldar will be with them, she said softly, more to herself than her officers. He knows the truth. His masters do not. That makes him dangerous and useful. Her aide glanced at her. Do you believe he will surrender? Hale's expression remained unreadable. I believe he has already begun to understand. But surrender is not what we seek. We seek an end. The battlefield unfolded like a nightmare ballet. The Empire unleashed its fury first, torrents of plasma fire and kinetic storms tearing through space. The void itself seemed to shudder under the onslaught. Yet when the light cleared, their prey had vanished. Ripples shimmered, wormholes unfurling like petals. Out of them poured humanity's fleets, sleek, predatory vessels, each movement calculated with merciless precision. They struck not at the strongest ships, but at the arteries, supply carriers, command relays, shield coordinators. Every kill was deliberate, every strike final. Kaeldar's officers panicked, shouting conflicting orders as ships winked out of existence. He alone remained still, watching the patterns unfold. Do you see? He muttered almost to himself. They don't fight for glory. They don't fight to conquer. They fight to end the fight itself. The words chilled Varric, who stood rigid beside him. Then what hope do we have? Kaeldar's jaw tightened. Hope lies in surrender before pride kills us all. On the human flagship, Hale gave the order. Deploy the Retribution. The warship emerged from its cocoon of folded space, dwarfing even the Empire's grand vessels. Its hull burned with hybrid energy, every panel alive with purpose. Silence fell across comm channels as both sides stared at it, an abomination and a masterpiece, alien and human fused into a single blade aimed at the heart of an empire. The Retribution fired once. A single lance of energy cut through the void and gutted the Council's flagship, splitting it open as though it were paper. The explosion painted the battlefield in fire. Entire fleets faltered, discipline dissolving into terror. In that moment, Kaeldar knew the war was lost. The humans had not come to spar, they had come to erase. His pride, his people's pride, was ash. He turned to Varric with a final clarity. Signal surrender. Now, before none of us live to learn the lesson they teach. Varric hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear. Then he nodded, his hands moving quickly over the console. Across the battlefield, Imperial channels filled with the white flag of submission. Hale's eyes narrowed as the signals lit her displays. He's yielding, her aide breathed. She did not smile. He understands. The guns fell silent, leaving only the echo of destruction drifting among shattered hulls. Humanity's fleets did not cheer. They stood in quiet formation, grim sentinels in the void. To them, victory was no triumph, it was inevitability. When Kaeldar was brought aboard the Retribution, he expected mockery, chains, humiliation. Instead, he was met with silence. Hale waited for him in the warship's stark chamber, her uniform dark, her face carved from the same steel as the vessel itself. "You could have killed us all," Kaeldar said, voice low, almost reverent. "We could have," Hale agreed. Her gaze did not waver. "But vengeance is waste. Control is not. You will govern what remains of your people. Not as a conqueror, but as a servant of order." Kaeldar bowed his head, the weight of defeat pressing down. "You have claimed dominion over the galaxy." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "No, we have claimed the right to survive. If that frightens the galaxy, so be it." There was no triumph in her tone, only exhaustion and truth. She did not relish this power, but she would not release it either. Too much had been lost, too much had been awakened. Humanity could never again be what it had been. Kaeldar studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. In defeat, he found a strange respect for her people, for the brutal clarity they carried. Perhaps serving them was not humiliation, but inevitability. When he was escorted away, Hale stood alone in the chamber, her reflection caught in the polished steel. Around her, the hum of the Retribution pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. She closed her eyes briefly, thinking of the son she had lost, the countless dead whose names would never be sung. Her whisper was barely audible. "We asked only to be left alone. They taught us otherwise. Now we will never sleep again." The battlefield behind them lay silent, an empire shattered, a galaxy trembling. Humanity had not sought war, but war had sought them. And in answering, they had remembered what they were capable of. The future stretched outward, vast and uncertain. But one truth had been carved into the stars. Humanity was awake, and the galaxy would never be the same.